Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very senior and respected urban planner and a slum rehabilitation expert, a very good friend and a fellow member of the YPO from Mumbai, India, Mr. Mukesh Mehta. Mukesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I feel honored and privileged
Thank you.
to have this discussion with you.
Thank you so much. Mukesh is the chairman of Project Consultants Private Limited, urban planners and architects relevant to the 21st century's needs of development. He has extensive experience in slum redevelopment in India and around the world. And as I mentioned, he's a fellow member of the YPO. And I'm going to talk to Mukesh today about his expertise of slum development, but I'm going to take 30 more seconds to give you a little bit more about his background from being a steel trader to a real estate development expert in the US. He has now become a visionary in urban planning and architecture in India. So, Mukesh, let's talk slum development. Tell me a little bit about your vision for a slum-free Maharashtra, which can obviously go into a slum-free world.
So, Maharashtra, as of 2011 census, had 189 cities which were infested by slums. And based upon sort of extrapolation and the present assessment, the slum structures are almost 3 million and more in these 189 cities.
Right.
Now, there is this constant concern that cities, the slums are going to grow. But we have created through research a sort of strategy in which every one of these 189 cities can not only become slum-free, but we can reduce inequalities and bring the slum dwellers into mainstream of the citizenry. And we've created that in a way that, in fact, the government, instead of thinking of this as a liability, could generate a surplus of over 5 lakh crore rupees to do all this.
Very well said. So when I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation, you also mentioned that in 2022, by some estimates, 1.1 billion people lived in urban slums. And in 30 years, this could rise to 2 billion. Yet you believe it is possible to make the world slum-free through sustainable and inclusive development. Tell me a little bit more about your thoughts.
So the thoughts are, I can't say I believe that it would happen, because this can only happen, as the former Secretary General of UN said, Kofi Annan said, that we have solutions to our problems. All we need is political will, and to that I add bureaucratic support. So this solution is available, what I've said, since 2009. But to get political will and bureaucratic support across the world is the major challenge. Technically and financially, it's feasible to do so. So this is the crux.
Well said. Mukesh, a few minutes back, you mentioned that the making cities slum-free could generate over 500 billion rupees for the government. Can you help me understand how this financial model works?
Yes. So, in fact, the government of Maharashtra has started this initiative in 1997. They respect the fact that the land occupied by the slum dwellers is lost forever. You can't just remove slum dwellers, especially in cities like Mumbai, where almost 50% of the population lives in slums.
Right.
So they have, in fact, through their policy, they're leveraging the land, the value of the land encroached. They get into public-private partnership with developers. And these developers then provide housing for the slum dwellers. And in lieu of that, they would get certain incentives for development. So it's a win-win for all. The
Right.
only aspect that we have changed is that so far the model provides for just basic amenities and low-cost housing to the slum dwellers. While we say that no, respect the fact that they are important human resources,
Mm.
there's massive amount of intelligence and talent
Mm.
in the slums amongst the people who live there. And
Right.
if we harness that, we have capabilities of creating engineers, architects, entrepreneurs within the slums. And if that is harnessed, they become engines for economic development.
Mm.
And therefore, it becomes a win win for all.
Great
And
response.
in this process,
Mm.
when the developer, originally the government, were giving away this land for free for the developer because they thought it's a liability.
Mm.
Ever since I've gotten involved, since 2004, I've advised the government that
Mm.
the government should demand premium.
Right.
And so they're demanding premium now
Mm.
for participating in projects like Dharavi,
Mm.
etc. And if this is sort of replicated elsewhere, we've done micro analysis of
Mm.
how the government can generate over 5 lakh, over 500 million
Million
rupees.
rupees. And you also say that slum dwellers are no different from our forefathers. I wanted to ask you, what makes your slum redevelopment model unique as compared to so many efforts that have been made all over the world uh, for this project?
So the first is I spent 6 months in Dharavi
Mm.
before I started the project. And in that, I had thousands of meetings
Mm.
with the slum dwellers to understand the slum ethos. And amongst the things that I learned was that intelligence and talent is not the monopoly of the rich and the famous.
Correct.
So, unfortunately, the urban planners, sociologists, social scientists, and even very major institutions across the world,
Mm.
they are promoting that these poor chaps live a wretched life. They need to be given something basic.
Mm.
And I'm inspired by countries like US, Canada, Australia, which is countries essentially created by migrant population.
Mm.
So I think of slum dwellers also as a migrant population from village to the cities
Mm.
looking to better their lives.
Mm.
So just giving basic housing and basic amenities, in fact, perpetuates inequalities and it keeps poor people poor and it segregates citizenry.
Well said.
Instead, through my analysis, I've come to a conclusion that there are 8 factors that determine the quality of life.
Mm.
The first is, and I've created an acronym called High Heights.
Mhm.
And this is to create an ecosystem for reducing inequalities in housing, infrastructure, healthcare, income generation, knowledge or education, environment, socio-cultural development, and security.
Mm.
So if you take the first letter from each of this, health, income, knowledge, environment, socio-cultural
Yeah.
development with housing and infrastructure,
Mm.
you'll come up with high heights.
Yeah.
So unless you reduce inequalities in high heights,
Mm.
you cannot, in fact, create sustainable slum redevelopment. And
Amazing.
that's the model that we follow.
What an amazing response. Thank you. Could you also, for my viewers and listeners, tell us what steps are taken from the time you actually start to plan to redevelop a slum to the completion of the project?
So, of course, the first is to understand
Mm.
the needs of all the stakeholders
Right.
because we have conflicting needs. The slum dwellers can't be wished away. At the same time, taxpayers feel that they're sort of a sort of uh, parasites. the government feels everyone should be taken care of,
mm,
and yet it does not have resources. So I start essentially with interacting with every stakeholder, in the sense the key stakeholders, understand their needs, and after that follow the government rules. Within that, the government had so far given very basic low level of facilities to slum dwellers. I interacted with the government and showed that it's important to enhance the quality and enhance the capabilities of slum dwellers.
right.
Fortunately, the government of Maharashtra has accepted that. Then
Mm,
we do technical and financial viability. And then we say that we have opportunity to regenerate cities like Mumbai.
mm,
And therefore, instead of doing this basic issues, let's create a beautiful city, because countries like US, countries like Canada, etc.,
mm,
have embraced their immigrants, and now those immigrants are driving the economy
mm.
and bringing the countries to such high level. So
Well
we
said.
go to the whole process
Mm,
of from A to Z of sort of designing, interacting,
mm,
socio
mm,
cultural interaction, etc., and
mm.
come up with a solution.
Wonderful. And how do you ensure that slum redevelopment doesn't perpetuate existing socio-economic inequalities?
So, in fact, if you take care of high heights, you harness the talent in slums,
Hmm,
because everyone doesn't want to stay for free.
hmm,
They're not staying for free in the first place. But if you provide them opportunity to rise, they also want to integrate with the citizenry.
right.
My father came with 30 rupees in his pocket
Hmm,
before I was born.
hmm,
But by the time I was born, people gave him opportunity, and he had bought a mansion for himself with a tennis court in the backyard.
hmm,
So I see in all these slum dwellers a close connection to my family,
hmm,
and I think of them as equal to me or equal to my parents.
hmm,
And I think if we just harness this, you don't have to bulldoze them.
hmm. What a great response. Thank you. But the other perspective I wanted from you, Mukesh, was that in any slum, there are a lot of vulnerable communities as well. And these could be elderly, these could be differently abled, these could be children, they could be culturally different. How do you address the needs of all these vulnerable communities?
In fact, if you treat them like us,
Hmm,
we also have the same kind of elderly, children, vulnerable, etc. And if you deal with them the way we deal with ourselves, then those inequalities have gone.
correct.
And so there's no question of any vulnerability for anyone.
Hmm. Okay. But you also speak about uh, being able to replace low cost housing and basic amenities with low maintenance housing and amenities for a similar kind of a cost. How do you, how would you explain something like this?
So a simple example I give you for Dharavi. In Dharavi, the government had invited builders to redevelop Dharavi and for free and gave additional incentives.
Right.
There were no takers. Then I came along and I told the government, look, you have 600 acres of land. Slum redevelopment means I have to demolish all these structures
Hmm,
and rebuild.
hmm,
Once I rebuild that, I have to work it to international standards.
hmm,
Once I have done that, the whole property value increases. When I do that, there's so much profit
hmm,
that we generate that, in fact, you can give. Government is still sort of uh, charging certain things,
hmm,
but I had originally designed a model that for the rest of their lives, the slum housing could be sort of maintenance free,
hmm,
done from the profits generated by the developer.
hmm,
Even now, for the first time, we've created in Dharavi the model where
hmm,
for 15 years, the developer
hmm,
will give free maintenance for external paint, for lifts, for pumps, for leakage, electricity, etc., to the slum dwellers. know how, Sasutosh, yours or mine, the developers have given such
Right.
kind of guarantees.
Mm.
And that's the kind of profits that can be generated,
Mm.
surpluses that can be generated.
Mm.
And in fact, the who's who of the world wanted to participate in Dharavi project. And Dharavi is not unique. This can happen anywhere in the world.
Correct.
And it's easy to be done.
Mm. But, the question that comes to my mind, Mukesh, is that the result of a major development can be financially very rewarding. To get it started, there would be a very different set of financial challenges. It needs a buy-in, it needs a lot of money up front. What are some of these big financial challenges in slum redevelopment, and how can these be overcome?
See, the challenge is, and perhaps I'm the culprit here. For the first time, I showed the government that there's money to be made
Mm.
in slum redevelopment. Once that has happened, people who would never have taken interest in slum redevelopment
Mm.
have started to sort of get onto that sort of honeycomb to try to suck in as much as possible.
Mm.
There are enough takers, but people get restricted because certain sort of, everything does not operate transparently. If it does, there is enough for all, and there are not going to be challenges. People, as long as there's money, people want development. And
Correct.
I've shown there is. But now it becomes competitive
Mm.
to say, let's limit it, let's sort of create obstacles. If
Mm.
these are not created, I guarantee you that there are enough takers and people would love to do it. Government's job is to facilitate the
Mm.
challenges that the local goons or the local underworld, etc., do
Mm.
not obstruct.
Mm.
Unfortunately, what I have found sadly, very sadly, is that a lot of NGOs who thrive on poverty
Mm.
become the biggest obstructionists out of
Right.
insecurity
Mm.
that they might lose their client base.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. So, one more question relating to slum development. Then I have a few questions for your other avatar as an urban planner and architect relevant to the 21st century. But my next question relating to slum development is, what is the long-term socio-economic impact that you anticipate once Slum-Free Maharashtra project is implemented?
I think substantial poverty,
Hmm.
first thing, would be alleviated.
Hmm.
In the model that I've created, you do not have to spend a single rupee of taxpayers' money to service the urban poor for education, for healthcare, for any of their needs. And I think, for example, today we had, when I started, the informal economy of Dharavi was roughly 500 crores or 5 billion rupees. Uh, Based upon my model, it would become uh, 4 times as much,
Wow.
4 to 5 times as much,
Hmm.
and it would become formal economy.
Hmm.
Now you can imagine if this happens just in 5% of Mumbai slums,
Hmm.
what could happen internationally?
Hmm.
And for me, biggest inspiration are the countries like US, etc.
Right.
And that is what we can do. We can become a developed nation
Hmm.
without trying to fight for the sort of shortages, and we can create a massive big pie from
Correct.
which all of us can share.
Correct. Well said. Let me now switch gears, Mukesh, because while you are an expert in slum development, I've seen some of your incredible designs for urban India, and these are really 21st century designs. So, my first question for you is that, can you talk a little bit about how your approach to architecture focuses on smart and sustainable designs that can foster inclusive growth?
So this is inspired. I'm an architect graduated from 20th century.
Yeah.
But in 21st century, we have incredible visionaries,
Mm.
the likes of Zaha Hadid, Kaya Trava, many others. And when you're building in new city countries, India is rebuilding itself. And you get inspired by countries like China, countries like Dubai, etc. We need to build to serve for the 21st century with technology, sustainability, uh, with designs that sort of blend in with the change in ecosystem. And that's what we transformed ourselves, my organization. And what we do is these designs become sustainable because they're eco-friendly, etc. And they also cater to take advantage of the latest technology in construction, etc., and become fresh. And I hope more architects, urban planners get into that, because many of my peers, I feel sad, are still stuck into the 20th century architecture. If we can draw inspirations, newer cities across the world are doing that. You can imagine where we can take the country to. And what's happened in my particular case is the clients have loved it so much that they are paying me premium fees, even without my asking, to say, "Oh my God, it's so good that our profits have soared." So all of this is possible, and I would urge my fellow peers to also try to follow that model.
Well said. So, Mukesh, I have time for two more questions. What are some of the biggest challenges in transforming traditional urban planning models into those that are relevant to the 21st century?
I I don't I just feel that if we move away and put this, which urban planning models today do, where they are relying for the urban poor, etc., and treat them as a separate category. If somehow within the model, as we've done in Dharavi and elsewhere, we integrate the model to provide public-private partnership in services like education, healthcare, etc. And in those urban planning models, if we include that kind of additional spaces where public-private partnerships can become feasible, we work towards mass transportation rather than, creating the snob value of just having cars, etc. Take advantage of recycling, solid waste, wastewater, etc. All this can become a part of planning process, and which is what we're doing. So frankly, it's not a challenge. It's just a matter of shift in paradigm. And otherwise, you just need to sort of put it together, but have that mindset that slum dwellers are equal to us.
That's it.
And once you do that, then everything else will fall in place.
Correct. And my last question to you, Mukesh. My last question to you. Everyone's now talking in urban India about green buildings, about sustainable buildings. How do you incorporate eco-sensitive and futuristic designs into your projects? And I've seen some very beautiful designs that you have done while balancing the demands of modern urban spaces.
So in fact, on one of the projects which Asutosh you've seen, we had to design a university township on 150 acres of land.
Yeah.
On that 150 acres of land, we've made all the buildings which we could green, and you've seen them. And the total amount of green space that we have is 200% of the land area.
Wow.
Now, in that, firstly, we found ways in which it can be maintained. The temperature becomes low, the radiation, the heat, etc., is under control. Air conditioning, electricity, cost reduced. We recycle solid waste, we recycle water, etc. And in fact, the operational costs become less also. So the initial cost is marginally not more, not substantially more, but the gains are many, many folds more.
Hmm.
And it's absolutely possible. Right now, there are people who are fantastic expert, 1,000 times better than I am,
Hmm.
who can provide that kind of expertise across the world. And
Correct.
it's absolutely possible to achieve this.
Wonderful. And on that note, Mukesh, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about the amazing work that you're doing. I think I thought I had heard from you several times on slum development, but my conversation with you today, I've learned many new things. We covered a lot of ground. I think the most powerful message that you have given, not once, but repeatedly throughout our conversation, is that dwellers are no different from each one of us. And the day we start believing in something like this, all these problems will probably become easier to handle than what they may seem today. Thank you for some amazing thoughts that you have given on slum development. I think we covered a lot of ground on multiple subjects, and yet we were also able to get in a few questions on the amazing work you are doing in urban planning and modern architecture, which is fit for the 21st century. Thank you again
Thank
for
you.
speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Asutosh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.